news, whenever you see some sort of headline, we'll get into a discussion more of what sort of IQ and intelligence is and general intelligence in a minute. But one thing that I feel like comes up over and over again in the news is the difference between people or populations on Earth. If there is difference in IQ, it cannot have a genetic basis. And this is something that Michael just forwarded me an article in the Telegraph this week saying that whatever difference there is between different people, this is all due to the environment and it can't be based on genes. I don't know about you guys. I don't understand why one is better than the other. Being that you have to categorically say that it cannot be genetic, but it can be environment. I mean, it doesn't seem to change the outcome. Does it?
Well, there's a few things that to say off the top there in terms of the anxiety people have about intelligence. I think on one level, it's just a really visceral anxiety about the possibility that somehow we're not all naturally equal or naturally capable of being equal. So just the existence, just the claim that some people have an advantage wherever it comes from makes people uncomfortable. And this is why you get arguments about, but there's different kinds of intelligence, right? Some people have more of this kind, and some people have more of my son when he was young went to a Waldorf school. But anyways, that was part of their philosophy. They really push it like, well, the kids are all equal. Some will do better in some areas, and some will do better in other, this sort of thing, right? So I think that's part of the anxiety. But yeah, I agree with you. The anxiety heightens, becomes accelerated once you start talking about the connection to the possibility that it can be genetic. And of course, even what the term genetic means to people is not always clear what people exactly mean by that. But I think that what bothers people about that is the perception that that they lose something of their notion of I don't know if free will is exactly the right word, but some sort of autonomous possibility. I mean, like if it's in my genes, then there's nothing that I can do about it, and people don't like the feeling, I guess, disempowerment or something, like some kind of metaphysical or disempowerment or something that makes people uncomfortable.
I think that last part that you said, that if it's in the genes, then there's nothing you can do about it. I think that's more what a lot of people worry about.
So the fact that it's almost deterministic would be.
Yeah. And then you start bringing into the whole issue of populations and how populations end up with different averages, IQs, and then you get into, then it starts getting really, really thorny in terms of what people. I'm sorry, just let me finish in terms of what people aspire for, what they think of as a good society, and what they aspire for. It not only becomes complicated, you begin to think it might be impossible.
Yeah, there's also other things, like some people focus on averages because on an individual basis, they might not be able to paint the narrative they want to paint, right?
Right, yeah. But I mean, at the same time, by the time, if you're going to take a snapshot of the population at any time, whether there are differences, whether they were due to the environment or to some sort of genetic basis, I mean, that doesn't change the fact that you're finding differences.
Yeah, and I think that like you were asking before, Patricia, about the resonance about this, and of course the thing that usually comes up is that the Nazis were, this is how the Nazis thought, right? And we know where that led, right? That led to a really bad place, But the problem, of course, is that with this kind of thinking, of course, is that you can take it, and I think this is what you were alluding to in your earlier question, is that you could take let's take the radical environmentalist point of view. Let's take the point of view that genes have nothing to do with it, and it's all from environment. Well, that was pretty much the position of the Marxists and the Soviet government. We talked about this in an earlier episode, talked about Lysenko and this sort of total denial of a genetic influence in the Soviet Union. And So there's an example of, a radical environmentalist position. Did that turn out a lot better than the Nazi experiment turned out? Like, it's not like whether you're an environmentalist or a hereditarian doesn't, exclude the possibility of murderous totalitarianism. It's not like one excludes the other. They're both possible under whichever philosophy you're operating, or whichever,
right. Right. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it seems to me that we've taken like a good position, that we've sort of come across as a society be like this, and we don't want to discriminate against people, between people, and that's fine. But that has sort of taken a conceptual leap to say now, well, there's actually no differences between people.
The thing is, like, if you have a population difference, that does not mean you discriminate between individuals, right?
Exactly. Well, exactly. That doesn't mean you have to pretend that they're all the same.
Right. But like, for example, like if you're deciding whether to hire someone as, I don't know, a physicist or a software engineer or a data scientist or something like that, you're judging that individual's IQ. If that person being in a group, a much larger group with, say, hundreds of thousands of people or millions of people, that average is irrelevant, right? Because you're judging this person on their own personal merit, right? So it's like, who cares like what the average is in terms of like operational, being it operational in terms of like hiring decisions or whatever, right? Like, it's irrelevant.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I want to qualify that a little bit, and of course, and people say that all the time, and I have said that in the past, and there's a level at which that's true, but it's also true that if a particular population, if you say an average of population is true, any one person from that average, for that population, you don't know where they're going to fall in the distribution. Obviously, that's true. But
Correct.
If you had to lay money on it, right? If you had to bet what it was, your smartest bet would be bet close to the average of the population, right?
Well, so that's only if you don't know anything about that person.
If you don't know, that's right. If you don't know anything else about them, that's right. Right. And this is why you get into the situation where people fall into, and I agree with you, this is a mistake, but this is why people fall into the tendency to assume that when they meet an individual from a group, they know something about the group. They tend to, make these assumptions. This is what we call prejudice, right? This is,
right.
This is literally what prejudice is, but is not without any kind of statistical foundation to make it, right? So this is where things get complicated, right?
Right.
Go ahead.
Oh, no. I was just kind of summing up what Michael said, and I feel like you're going to build on it more. But it's just, Michael and I have talked about this. It's not whether the fact should exist or not. Science is always about what you do with it, right? Like just exploring something for the sake of knowing more about something. You can't really moralize the science.